Low brain has got three functions. Can I eat this? Should I fight this? Or should I flirt with this? I
Ah,
think we'll stick with that for the third F.
thank you.
So you got three F brain and high functioning brain. Now, the second you start to like go, blah, 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 you're putting that person to three F brains. So now they're going to do one of two things: eat you, fight you, or tickle you on the
Flirt with
chin.
you. Turn you around.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Welcome to episode 29 of the Frugal Firearms Podcast, the podcast that is here to help you save money and become the most effective self-defender you possibly can, or the most effective recreational shooter you possibly can. But going to that first point about the most effective self-defense person you can possibly be, and for the least amount of money, probably one of the most important things that maybe a lot of us haven't considered is whether or not the tools that God gave us, when we were born, are actually available to us to use in a self-defense context. And by that, I mean, your hands, your feet, and, I don't mean your feet as a weapon. Maybe your feet is running away. Also,
Hmm.
your mind. Are you thinking about the situational awareness of what's going on around you? Or do you simply jump right to the point where you need to draw your gun and yeah, maybe that wasn't the best solution. So, in order to talk about that subject today, which isn't strictly firearms, but it does closely relates to our lifestyle, doesn't it? I've brought on Mr. Jay Cooper from Buddha Brothers. He lives up in Canada, and he is a person that, well, let me give you a little background. When you start doing a podcast, one of the first things you think about is who do I want to have on this show, and what are the personalities that I want to bring to the audience? And I initially talked to Jay over 3 years ago about being on this show. And finally, we get to that point. And he hasn't been evading me. It's nothing like that. But the conversation just kind of went away for a while. But then he was very gracious enough to pick it right back up where it was. And he's going to give you some perspectives that if you haven't seen his reality check channel on YouTube or his reality check videos that are also on Facebook, then you're missing out. I mean, and you're missing out big time. So, first off, we're going to bring on my co host, Ken. Ken, good day. How are you, sir?
Doing well, doing well. Looking forward to this show. Should be very good. Jay, welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you inviting me on.
So, Jay, a little bit of background from you. You were law enforcement for, I think you said 10 years in Great Britain and 10 years in Canada. Now you either, I don't actually know this. Do you actually teach martial arts or you simply talk about it? And how does that experience shape your opinions and what you want to talk to people about who just aren't exposed to this stuff at all?
Yeah, so correct. 10 years in the UK. I do with two agencies over there. With Kent Police, which is in the south of England, and Greater Manchester Police, which was in the north of England, also happens to be my hometown. It's fascinating the differences between the various departments because policing is seen as a Gestalt entity. It genuinely is not. There's a lot of variation, even in a small place like England, which is not that larger a territory at all. And there's still a lot of variations across the board with that. And then Canada, I was with Calgary Police, the municipal department. Um, this is the question. I'll anticipate this question. RCMP are basically federal, and they have powers across the whole country, and they tend to do the smaller towns and the outliers, and the Mounties always get their man, etc. It's a little, almost not a million miles away from what you got in the US with the state troopers and the sheriffs and the FBI and the blah blah blah. But I wasn't a Mountie, although everyone always asks me that because due south and all the programs, they think police, Canadian, Mountie. Exactly, I'm the most English sounding Mountie there ever would have been. But anyway, so no. And as for martial arts, oh, good, yeah, I've been doing that for 35, 36 years now. And I used to have a gym. I closed that down actually in December. Um, mainly because I was focusing on other areas. So there's other bits and pieces of work I want to be doing. But I still have private clients that I teach. Jeet Kune Do being my main art, which is Bruce Lee's. I also
Yep.
am a boxing coach. I'm a wrestling coach. I teach jiu-jitsu. I teach eskrima,
Mm.
combatives, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other, as the saying goes. Black belts in 5 disciplines at last count.
Wow. So, and for those who don't know, Eskrima, they may not be familiar with it. It's a Filipino martial art that is largely stick based, and that gives you in your escalation of, if you ain't got no hands, then well maybe you got sticks that you can. And by ain't got no hands, I mean you're just not good with your hands. And sticks is the next, I guess, layer up. Would you put it that way?
It's Yeah, it's unusual, and it's just possibly a slight diversion from the main topic. But if you look at the way we perceive martial arts, we look at the Chinese and the Japanese systems, which are the bigger ones. They start the students empty-handed, and then they work their way through. When you get to the advanced levels, it's like, okay, now we will teach you the weapons. In the Filipino systems, it's literally the reverse. They start you with the weapons on the assumption that if like you said, if you don't have good hands, you might have a hard stick. And then once you've actually learned to use the weapon flows, then you can take the stick out and it blends to the empty hand. So they actually go weapon first, empty second. Most of the systems tend to go empty first, weapon second.
I never knew that. That's interesting. My oldest son took Eskrima a little bit for a while, as part of
Do you
actually
know what style he did?
well, it was a class that was Kempo, but they had an Eskrima expert
Okay.
who would come in and help. So it gave them a little bit of variety. And that's why you're on the show, Jay, really, because I think our audience benefits from maybe not a constant diet of guns, guns, and more guns, but something else that when it comes really down to brass tacks and the moment of need, there's a certain amount of people who think that the gun is the first and foremost opportunity, where in an escalation of force it really isn't. So and I think that people, well, let's start a little higher, maybe at the situational awareness problem, because I think you teach a lot in your videos, which again I thoroughly recommend people go watch this. The people get into situations because they don't have either the appreciation or the amount of damage that can happen, or they lack the situational awareness to see what's coming at them. And you've seen this before in not only the videos that you promote, but at the same time on your law enforcement side. So, how do people fix that problem and make it part of their daily existence?
One of the things I did with situational awareness was in policing, as I'm sure you're familiar with Jeff Cooper
Of course.
and
Yes.
his color coding. That was my first exposure. Now, of course, Cooper wasn't concerned with awareness. He was shoot, no shoot states. The color coding then got transposed over to be kind of an awareness piece for the police originally, which I am one of many that then took that and applied it to the civilian marketplace. But there's many of those type of models out there. The OODA loop, for example,
Hmm.
is the same sort of principles, and they all, arguably, we had in the UK something called the Green Cross Code, which is how you teach kids to cross the road. Stop, look, listen both ways, over you go. At its core, it's a situational awareness piece because you're in a high risk environment. You look at what's going on, you make a decision based on that information that gets processed in. If it's safe to walk across, if it isn't safe to cross, you don't. You wait until it is, or you go to the next crossing. And it's a very simple, low level thing, but that reflects what situational awareness is. Now, the problem we have is taking the color code, for example, and I don't want to insult your listeners' intelligence or anything else like that, but obviously you've got the white, yellow, orange, red, and then black or brown, as I call it.
No, go ahead and explain it.
Well, white, in terms of how I teach this as a self-defense principle, white is oblivious state. That means you're not paying attention to what's going on. You're not really tuned in. You're not paying attention to the environment. Now, there's schools of thought. I don't have an issue with people being in white when it's time to be in white. Like, if you're in cold yellow all the time, it's exhausting. And if
Hmm.
I'm in the bath, I'm likely to be scanning under the mat for, the ninjas that are hiding there. If I'm, at home watching TV, I tend to lower my level. Now, just because I'm at a lower level doesn't mean I can't click back into a higher level of awareness should something come to my attention. That comes as part of the practice. So it's a little like anything. You can, if you're a conditioned athlete, you can perform moderately close to the appropriate level with no warm up, if you've done it a long time. If you haven't warmed up, then or you're not a trained athlete, your body will tend to like break down on you. I add it's not a good idea to do that, but the capacity to do something isn't diminished by that. So when you look at code white, that's your oblivious state, awareness, not paying attention to what's going on, absolutely no clue, your head in the phone or texting or reading a book or whatever it is you happen to be doing. Even little things like the way people go around a corner. If you look at when you take like you do the shooting line, you take the longer line and you come out wide so you get the view quickly. Well, if you watch most people take a corner, they take it hugging the building. So they get surprised when something's there. And again, it's not like paranoia, but it's just giving yourself that ability to get that bigger sight picture. But those are like little examples of how people operate in code white or the state of obliviousness. Code yellow is the next stage up from that, and that's kind of that aware of what's going on. You're not necessarily focusing in on anything, but you just kind of got the little internal radar thing going on. Most people should be in code yellow when they're driving, paying attention to the cars, the signals, the lights, the depth of volume, speed of traffic, all that sort of thing. You're not necessarily focusing on any one thing, but you've got a good awareness of everything else that's going on around you. Code orange means you've highlighted a specific issue or something which could potentially present a threat, a problem, an engagement, whatever you want to classify that as. And you start to formulate plans, negative plans, positive plans, neutral plans, depending on the situation. That can be as simple as you see a group of people, you either go back the direction you came in, you cross the road, or if you think you can, just walk past without it being an issue, you just carry on walking. Not every potential threat is a threat, but it's just an awareness of that and formulating a plan. And code red is you execute that plan that you'd formulated in your head. Now, it becomes a little bit, I tend to fold OODA loop in with this as well, which is observe, you see what's going on, you orient based on what you see, what you know, your history, your experience, your training, your background, your operator state. You decide the best course of action, and then you act on that course of action. Now, of course, that can go between the observe and orient lots and lots and lots, because as soon as you look at anything, it instantly changes, and all these scenarios are dynamic. So when you break situational awareness down and you start getting into the meat and potatoes with it, I normally spend 2 to 3 hours explaining color coding to people. It's when people say, I want you to do a self-defense seminar, just quickly, I always go, I'm like, fine, we're doing situational awareness then, because outside of that, there's not a lot I can do with you for 2 or 3 hours. I'll give them a few, eye pokes and things like that, but it's mainly if you pay attention to what you're doing, most the stuff's avoided. Like, what's a seatbelt for in a car is a good example. What does a seatbelt do?
I mean, the seatbelts in the event that I'll stick with your example that your pre-planning of contact avoidance didn't work out, then you
Mm-hmm.
have something there to restrain you to prevent greater injury than you would otherwise suffer. But there's a degree of I never saw it coming because you really didn't see it coming, or there's a degree of I should have seen it coming and I didn't.
It fulfills the same function in both of those. Now, that's your skill set, your hard skills. Whether
Mhm.
that's hands-on, intermediate weapons, firearms or something. Well, if we're going up from that, we're in tanks and intercontinental ballistic missiles. But that has to be there. But 90% of what we do can be taken care of just by keeping your head in the game and not switching off. There's an interesting thing. So I always do this with people as well. Where would you say would be safer, like a high street at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or a dark alley in a rough neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Not the dark early, I would think High Street, but I suppose you could have, depending on if you were in the middle of the street, and cars was whizzing by you, it could be quite
Mhm.
dangerous.
Statistically, the high street's more dangerous. There's more crimes, more offences than you get at in the alleyway at 3 in the morning. Now, of course, it's a silly thing because a high street is always going to be safer in terms of what you get. The other reason is that if I was to drop you in a high street at 3 in the afternoon, you'd probably like look for the nearest coffee shop and then try and get an idea of where you're at. If I was to drop you in an alleyway at 3 in the morning, your head would be on a swivel permanently.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So your attention to the area that you're in would make that area not necessarily safer, but your ability to interact with the environment would be much more heightened. So the chance of you formulating an appropriate response and responding to what's coming up would be that quick. In the alleyway, your ability to respond is more tuned in and quicker because the nature of the environment, if so, non-permissive environment, as if you want to use that terminology, you'll be on a swivel. You'll be paying attention to everything. You'll be much more aware of who's there, what they're doing, what's going on. If you're in a high street, because it's a crowded environment, a perceived safe environment, and by and large it is a safe environment, your threshold for attention will lower. So you'll hit that white state before you even know it. And then before you realize it, you got pickpocketed, you've been assaulted, you've been mugged, or something happens that you just didn't see coming because, frankly, you weren't paying attention to it. Both because it's in the middle of the day and it's crowded, so there's lots of people around. And also because there's so much noise, unless you've kind of got a filter that you can pick things out that are of interest, you just won't notice it because you can only process so much information at once.
So is that the limiting factor for a lot of your students is either their lack of training of situational awareness or their ability to process just because of, well, again, lack of experience in doing that because they don't walk around in yellow all the time?
You do. What you learn to do is you just learn to know when to lower your needle. It's a little like the revs on a car. Like you can't keep it pinned, here because you don't have the space to accelerate. You just maxed out your revs. So we always begin with the state of the operator. You have to have a calm state yourself. If you're agitated or you're already, jacked up before you're leaving the house, you need to take about 3 minutes to do some breathing just to bring yourself down again. So the minimum I always say to guys is in the morning when you wake up, just take 2 or 3 minutes just to sit there and breathe. Now you can whatever meditation people do, they can belly breathe, which is a fantastic exercise. Do that in the morning and do that, on an evening at a minimum. You wake up, you're calm when you start the day, and at the end of the day, you blow all the stresses of the day out with that breathing as well. So the state of the operator has to be paramount because most people they don't make bad choices because they're bad people. They don't make bad decisions like on purpose. I don't think anyone sets out to make a bad decision. Obviously, there are always exceptions to those rules, but it's cognitive failure that kicks in. It's their ability to process information and then formulate a plan based on the information they're receiving. They just get overloaded really quickly. And that was actually the one I left out of the color code, which is code black, which is total shutdown. So you can't process anything. So this is when people, they just go mental and frenzy and see red, or they just freeze and they don't know what to do. I nicknamed it Code Brown for the civilian market, for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
I find it lightens the mood slightly. One of my true story, when I was in training in class in Canada, we were doing room clearing drills. And it was only rubber guns, so we weren't like doing live rounds. It was just like the idea of the exercise rather than a live simulation. And it was at the end of the day, everyone's always like, oh, do another one of these things. And the instructors, two of them have had to go home early, so we were limited in instructors. So you're clearing the rooms, and then you find the person, okay, clearing, secure, okay, next room, and you're doing all the clearing. And because we'd found the two instructors that we knew were there, the guy that was leading just you could just see his body started going through the motions because he knew we'd done the exercise. We just had to clear the rooms. But one of the instructors ran round and came through one of the side doors at the back end and hid at the end of the maze that we were in, or the room that we were in. And so he's not paying attention. He came round with his gun, came out the front like that, and the instructor went and just screamed at him, and it was like a still motion. He just stood there like that. He didn't move. He just froze because he was done. He was just out instantly. It took about 10 or 15 seconds for him to like kind of realize what had gone on because he was in no threat, no risk, no actual consequence to failure within this environment outside of looking like a bit of a pudding in front of your classmates. And adrenaline threshold, cognitive failure hit. It was the most cold black I've ever seen anyone go. And it was a really interesting learning point.
So that really challenged his idea of his own readiness, I'm sure, if he was introspective about it, because he thought that, I've run this drill before. I know what's coming up. I know where the bad guy is. I know where the good guy is, the shoot, the no
Hmm.
shoot. And then, gosh, I would think that a person would understand that real life doesn't work that way much.
They should.
They
They should.
should.
But when you're in the end of the day, training exercise, we found the two. Hey, I'll just, go through the motions. You never go through the motions in anything you do.
So I'm sure that there's a lot of people in our audience, and I don't mean this is, it sounds like I'm criticizing my own audience. I'm not. That's not the point. But there's probably a lot of people who spend most of their time training at the range and shooting at paper targets under
Hmm.
zero threat, unless they're just being unsafe, but zero threat to themselves. And they know that they're sure that the paper target is not going to attack me, no matter like if I have a zombie on it, there's no threat. But as a result of that, they haven't trained to lower tiers. And my concern
Mm.
is that in the moment of need, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, that you won't have the time to get your weapon out. It's going to be on you so fast. And by the way, listeners, Jay also has on their Budo Brothers site has a video series that you can subscribe to and get, which is called Too Close for Comfort, which is what to do
Yes.
in the moment when someone is really in your face and you are maybe restricted on movement, certainly forward because that person's in your face or on your flank, but maybe because of other constraints, a wall, a corner, something like that. And they haven't trained to that scenario. So they're going to go to gun right away, and maybe that's justified. But how do you square these things? Going to a gun without training for anything else, and maybe not even being able to get to your gun because now you're physically not able to get it out of your, very expensive IWB holster.
Or your $10 Blackhawk. Um,
Well, that's not,
sorry.
that's another
Didn't,
topic.
didn't,
Not going
didn't mean to
there.
do that. No, I know. I'm teasing. It seems to be a running joke. I never had a problem with mine, but anyway, I digress. The too close for comfort thing is actually primarily aimed at those like the things you've always got, your hands and your mind and things, and the mouth. Too close for comfort is even for martial artists. Now you look at people that deal with hand-to-hand stuff all the time, and most people do not know how to generate impact or start a fight from close in or end a fight more accurately from close in. And a lot of this comes to do with decision-making thresholds. You can come in at lethal force instantly, no problem with that, if the boxes are ticked, and there's three of them. You can come in at just talking or walking instantly, not a problem. You can go from lethal, realize you don't need to, and come down the scale. You can start speaking and instantly jump. So it's less an escalation of scale and it's more a continuum, like a circle. You just come in at any one given point and you can just escalate or move across to wherever you need to be.
Before we lose that thought, if you come in at lethal on that circular
Mm-hmm.
continuum of force, have you now justified the other guy escalating way beyond proportion of what the actual conflict should have been in the first place? Because now you're putting him in a defensive position where now there's a disparity, right?
Correct. Correct. Now, if you're in proximity, of course, you've now escalated a situation where you might not be able to get that off. Now, you said something interesting I was going to bring into. I will come back to your point there. You said earlier people that shoot the targets and things all day, and then then they find something that isn't lethal they're not prepared for. I would argue they're not prepared for lethal either. They're prepared for target shooting, which is fine. It's necessary skill. I'm quite an average target shooter. I'm an okay shot. I'm not great. I don't spend as much time on the range as a lot of people do because I've got other things that I do and I train in. But I like to, just keep my hand in there just so I can, put a shot on target if I need to. But when it came to active scenarios, I was actually a way better shot because I move better dynamically than I do statically. I'm very left eye dominant as well, so I had to do a modified weaver rather than an isosceles, which is what they tend to teach in the academy. But when you're looking at lethal force, your three criteria, and different people use different terminology, but it's the same three things. They have to have a weapon capable of inflicting grievous bodily harm or higher upon you. They have to have the intention to use that, and they have to have a delivery system to actually put that upon you. So it's weapon, intent, delivery system. You need all three of those things in place for lethal force to then be a consideration. Me being crap at fighting doesn't instantly qualify it as lethal force. Just because I can't do anything else doesn't mean I then pull, Old Smoky out. So when you deploy a firearm or a weapon, like a blade, for example, as well, I'm a big knife guy, um, you're instantly making this lethal force, even if it wasn't to start with. So if you're having a disagreement, an argument, and potentially going to end up in fisticuffs, and then the second you pull out a lethal force option, this is now life or death for that person too, as you correctly identified. So you could put it in a position where you're now making it okay to kill you. You're allowing them to then employ lethal force, and you might not have needed to get to that point. So the considerations are always yourself and the other person. You can't just, well, I'm protecting myself. Well, yeah, you are, but you're now making them protect themselves. And there's a whole, even within police officers, officer involved self-induced jeopardy and things like that. There's a lot of legislation and laws and case laws around what you can and can't do with lethal force for that too. And as a civilian or non-officer, non-sworn, you don't have qualified immunity or protection of the agency that you represent or the state that you represent. So you're literally just on your own swinging in the breeze. If you're going straight to your gun, you've got a bigger problem because there's a lot of stuff you're missing that you probably could have done along the way. If it's the time and the place for the gun, sure, I don't have a problem. You can go straight to that gun. But if you're pulling that out and it isn't a gun time, you've got issues. And I don't just mean as in you got issues because you drew your gun. I mean, you've got issues going forward because now you've escalated a situation or you've made this exponentially worse. Then we start to get into the psychology of things as well, because when you kill someone, that's never going to be an easy thing to live with. Some people, if you've ever read on Killing by Grossman, if you haven't, I highly suggest. I'm sure most of your listeners will done, but if you haven't, well worth the investment of your time. The ability to actually kill someone isn't always in people.
Right.
One of the hardest things I have when I teach self-defense is getting people to actually hit people. I mean, properly hit them. It's a very big hurdle to overcome because as a society, we're conditioned to, have these barriers in place, these behavioral breaks that come upon us. If you're happy to just haul off and peel a few rounds off, then again, then you have got issues because it shouldn't be that casual for anything. Once you know your lines in the sand, where you should be looking to deploy lethal force, where you should be dialing back, where you should be wrestling, where you should be hitting, where you should be striking, whatever it happens to be, when you know your lines, your decision becomes a lot easier to make. Most people don't know their lines. They just stop and go. So they go white to black instantly like that, guns out, bang, bang, bang. And now all of a sudden we've got a lawsuit and a jail time on our hands potentially. And even if you get away or acquitted on any charges against you, there's, stress, hours, time away from family, money, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. And at the end of the day, you killed someone.
I've seen, though, so many other practitioners, I'm not saying on your site, that's a disclaimer, that basically say to seize the initiative very quickly if it looks like it's going to go violent and basically take the high ground in order to preclude the other person from having the tactical advantage of assuming that you've survived the initial contact and the surprise from the initial contact, that you go very aggressive, very fast. It's essentially what they term in the military of what's the word I'm looking for, or the phrase I'm looking for?
Epic fury.
No, not no. No,
I
I don't
like
mean
that.
I don't mean that. No, it's something of violence. Gosh darn it, why can't I remember that phrase? That should be on the
Sudden
tip of.
violence.
No, it's the application.
Asymmetrical, I think, might be the thing you're looking for.
Not really asymmetrical, but close to that. It's essentially the application of violence in a disproportionate manner early and often. And that is maybe the thing that I think people have.
But you got to get to that tipping point.
Well, but if the tipping point is dude pushes me and then I pull a knife on him.
This is the problem when you start to take military and law enforcement training to non-military, non-law enforcement environments. It does work. Or, well, that's not true. It doesn't work automatically. Context is always king. So when you look at most of the people providing firearms training and things like that as well, they have backgrounds in military and in law enforcement, and things like that. These days, you can, of course, qualify separately, but most people tend to come from those backgrounds. But the theaters that they're operating in are very different. If I'm in a theater of war, for example, yeah, I'm going to be peeling caps off shooting. I'll be getting those shots in first because I almost know the rules of engagement. Okay, the likelihood of you having a gun, bloody high. Likelihood of me having a gun, I've still got one on me. Here we go. But even there was a video I actually did a breakdown on it for my students. It was body cam footage from the Ukrainian conflict that's going on right now. It was a Russian soldier against a Ukraine soldier, and they started off basically closing down on each other. They ended up hand to hand wrestling with a blade. So even when a firearm in an environment where it's literally firearms all the time, it's military, highly trained, all that sort of thing, it still ended up coming down to who had the better wrestling, knife or otherwise. In a civilian setting, most problems are solved by awareness, your posture, your movements, body language, boundaries leaving or just not being where problems are likely to occur in the first place.
Exactly. Using my legs to walk away if I can.
No, even with my 52-year-old gammy knees, I can still get away at a fair clip if I need to. The gun is a last-ditch answer to a very narrow class of problems. It is not a panacea. It's not a universal solution. And for me, the gun should make you more careful, not more courageous.
Okay, so let's talk about Houston in 2023 at the
Mhm.
Mexican restaurant where the place was being robbed by a guy, what turns out later to be a toy gun, and waves the gun around rather indiscriminately and not really pointing at anyone in particular, demands their wallet. Most people acquiesce, give the wallet up because it's property and don't feel like getting shot, but they haven't really analyzed that it's not a real gun. And then as homie's leaving the place, your good Samaritan, who's already pre-positioned himself, offs the guy, shooting him multiple times in the back, basically executes the guy while he's on the ground after the gun's already been removed from him. You talked about perfectly, by the way, in that video, understanding what the pause means and being, accountable for every round that you send down range or send into somebody. For the backstory on this,
Mhm.
the guy was ultimately no charges were filed, but he's in Houston. So I think in most
Exactly. He's Texas. Any other state, he would be in prison for
toast,
many
toast.
years.
I didn't think it was personally. I can understand why, as long as the guy's an imminent threat, that you could take that action. But once he's disengaging and leaving, it would be really hard for me to decide that I'm going to shoot this guy as he's leaving. Yes, he still had a gun in his hand, but the pause is the thing that I think.
And keep going as well. That was the thing. It
Yeah,
was like he
right.
mag dumped him. He basically mag dumped the guy when he was already on the floor.
Yeah.
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 So what are your thoughts on that? Because the red mist came out and he couldn't shut it off.
The pause is so important because, and it's a good example and illustration of it, if a little extreme, because there was still a gun in play at that point. But not every movement is a lethal cue. Not every apparent threat is what it seems. And then once you've acted with the firearm, so once you send it out there, you can't get it back. You can't just oh, sorry, my bad. You can't load the previous save to keep your character points intact so you don't get punished and things. Um, the pause isn't hesitation for its own sake. It's a disciplined moment of recognition of what am I seeing and what's going on here right now. The restaurant example is a good one because the internet rewards speed of opinion, whereas reality rewards speed of judgment. And the pause is what allows you to do that. I've just come back from my LITA where I was teaching ethical decision making under pressure. And the basis of that is find decision points. Now, what I do is I tend to hide it as talking points. So find a point where you can talk to the guy. So I do this introducing through a series of drills. But the art of conversation is lost. And I had lots of experienced officers, some really good people. I met some fantastic officers while I was there, some very, very experienced. I always do a little dip test of the room, and I said, right, who trains here in some form of martial art? And hands go up. And one of the guys had been training in jiu-jitsu and martial arts and MMA for over 25 years and ran a school. There was some 12, 15-year guys there. And I said, okay, how much time did you put in on the mats this week? And they were like, oh, 2 hours, 3, 4 times a week. So, all right, 8 hours. And how much time did you put in the gym? Oh, well, hour, 3 or 4 days. Okay, so we've got another, let's say we're up to 12 hours. Did you only range time this week? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I spent about an hour or two at the range. Okay, so now we're getting to 14. I said, how much time did you spend on your talking this week? And they're like, what? And I said, well,
What?
you're talking. I don't mean talking. I mean practicing communicating, practicing finding these times when do I talk, when do I walk, when do I fight? Because policing has got this idea that when you're arresting someone, you're giving him instructions as you're arresting them, and you'll see it in the videos online. Some good channels out there. Reality Check with Jay Cooper's a good one,
I've
but there's
heard of
also
that.
like Active Self Protection. Yeah, it's a good channel. You should check it out.
Yeah, I
He's a
should.
very
Yeah.
handsome chap, although he's got longer hair than in some of the videos.
Mm.
But
You
then you got
mean
Active
John
Self
Correa, or
Protection.
did you mean this Jay Cooper
Yeah,
person?
no, no. Well, Johnny's hair's got really long now. He looks fun. I'm jealous. It's luxurious, John's hair
He's
now.
trading weight for hair, it seems.
Okay, that's a fair
Yeah,
swap.
yeah.
It's like a kind of
It's a
Samson
trade.
thing.
Yeah. Uh, I
Um,
I'm not sure I like the visuals on that, but go on, Jay. Yeah.
okay, it's fair enough. John's channel's great when the active self protection channel, but he tends to use a lot more of that side of the fence with it. But you always say, "Hey, get on the floor, drop a knife, drop a knife, drop a knife, drop a knife." Well, if you look at how we and this is why the pause becomes so important. There's a lot of like neuroplasticity and scientific things behind it. But if we go high brain, low brain, we kind of know where we're at with that. High brain's like the thoughts and the speech, the fine motor skills. Low brain has got three functions. Can I eat this? Should I fight this? Or should I flirt with this? I
Ah,
think we'll stick with that for the third F.
thank you.
So you got 3F brain and higher function brain. Now, the second you start to like go, blah, 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 you're putting that person to 3F brains. So now they're going to do one of two things: eat you, fight you, or, tickle you on the
Flirt with
chin.
you.
Turn you around.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you can't then expect them to comply or follow directions if you're coming in like rah, and you put them like rah, they're not in that brain. So you have to lower them down if you want to get compliance at that end. But we also have to bring ourselves down because now we're entering dangerously close to that cognitive failure mode. So if I can't bring myself down and just take that pause, and the pause isn't like, it doesn't have to be big. It's just a simple awareness of what's going on. Very good training example of this, and I can draw this from my own experiences when I was in the academy. Because as I said, not a particularly good paper shooter. I'm okay. I can put them where they need to be, but my grouping's not the best. But it's on target. It's fine. And then we have the Prism system in Calgary where you run the video scenarios and it runs like it's like the old is it Mad Dog McCree, the old video game?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of so the Prism system that we use is one of those sort of things. It's like videos and it responds in certain ways. But they also had some optional things on those where they had different sized round targets and numbered, and you had to shoot them in order. Now, guys that were way better shots than me would be going like bang, and then bang, bang. And their times were like, within a class of 30, they're roughly the same, but they're getting up there. I went up, and again, like I said, not the best shot, but it was like go. And the first thing I did was look where all the numbers were, and then went bang, 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 bang. And I was the second fastest in the class. Now, I'm not the best gunman, but I took time to see what was going on before I then engaged. It's a small example, and obviously it's within a safe training environment. But when you see what's going on, what's really going on versus what you think is going on, the vista of options then becomes open to you. Now, the Houston restaurant one is an interesting one because I'm not sure. I just shot the guy as he was going. Might have done. If I can't say I would. I can't say I wouldn't because I'm not there. And hindsight's always 2020. But at the point he's leaving, he isn't a threat anymore in the strictest sense of the word, unless he turns around and starts, peeling off rounds. I understand why that guy engages him. I genuinely do. I don't necessarily understand why he mag dumped him, other than the fact he was going for it, and that was it. He was in there.
Yeah, the difference between stopping someone and killing someone, I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
legally has some merit.
If I punch you and start to leave my size 11s on the side of your face repeatedly, I've gone beyond what person would consider reasonable. Just because it's there's a potential. If it looks like a gun, it's a gun. That's a simple rule. Or if it looks like it might be a gun and they're acting like it's a gun, it's a gun, even if it's a chair leg in a plastic bag or something. There have been instances like that. If they're using it in that manner to make you think it is, assume it is. If it turns out afterwards it isn't, then they shouldn't have pretended it was.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to risk your life over something that could be, no, you have to look at it with the best information you have in the instant in which you encounter it, and then make your best decision. And you know, if it turns out differently, then that might be something that you're going to have to litigate at another time.
Well, you're going to have to be able to articulate why you did what you did because it's going to get played over and over and over again in court for
Sure.
the jury to watch in slow motion when it didn't happen in slow motion. It's no different than watching a sports event where a referee got a bad call.
It's a decision made in seconds that is analysed for hours, put before the DAs and the lawyers for weeks and months, and is taught as an example for years.
Right.
It's unfair, but it is what it is. And this is the other thing. This is actually tying back to the piece about the training and well, I've got a gun, I'm fine. Um, if you look at an athlete training for an event, to use that example, an athlete spends 90% of their time training for 10% of performance. Most peace officers, police officers spend about 90% on performance and 10% on the actual training. So it's the only, well, not the only, but it's one of those examples of where the test actually comes before the lesson. And we don't want to find ourselves in that situation, whether we use a hand, a gun, or whatever it is, that all of a sudden now, well, I have my gun, he looked aggressive. You're going to need more than that. This is where that situational awareness piece comes into it as well, because it's not just where's the danger, it's what am I seeing? You'll hear things like bladed stance. I'm sure you're familiar with the term bladed stance, but I had this at Ilitra. I said, okay, what's a bladed stance? They said, well, we know what a bladed stance means. I said, I do. You do. But who's reading the report? Who is going to listen to this account of events going on? Tell me what that person was doing. Well, his left foot was backwards and it was raised, the toes were pointing slightly off to one side, the knees were bent, this foot was here. I call this a bladed stance.
A precursor or a furtive movement.
Yeah, but you have to qualify what it is if you're going to name it. You can't just name it outright and assume people know what you're talking about. And we fall into that jargon talking policing a lot, but the civilian world falls into that as well. Oh yeah, I feared for my safety. Why? Because that on its own means nothing. That's a conclusion. That isn't evidence. That's a conclusion. This happened. This happened. This happened. This happened. I saw this. I saw this. I heard this. I felt this. Therefore, I feared for my safety. That's fine. You can't go conclusion. I feared for my safety. Therefore, I used. There's a whole thing that has to go into justifying that conclusion. Fear for my safety. I apprehended immediate and lawful personal violence. Whatever you decide it to be, there has to be an explanation to that conclusion. The conclusion does not stand on its own.
So do armed people then, in your experience or what you've researched, jump into situations too early or without full context because they feel justified by virtue of being armed?
I think you find that. You do find it. I don't think it's that common, to be fair. If you look at the statistics of firearms owners and carriers versus those that are actually using them, I think we'd see a lot higher numbers on people using them unnecessarily if that was the predominant mindset. I don't think it is. I think it can become a comfort giver, or oh, I've got my gun, so I'm good to go. And there was one, I forget where it was. It was either Cuba or Costa Rica. I forget which one it was, and it was an argument between two neighbors, and it ended up being a bit of a shoving match. And then the other guy, he'd already put his piece on him, so he was ready to go. It became a pushing match, and again, he mag dumped him. He literally just pumped, his rounds into him, and there was absolutely no lethal force threshold met at
Right.
all. But it's like, I've got a gun, I'm going to use it. Now there was another video I did a breakdown on in the supermarket of all places, and a guy he'd helped the guy. So there was a big tall guy with a cowboy hat on, and the guy had helped him, and then he hadn't said thank you. So then he started beaking off at him for not saying thank you. We're already starting to get into a very dangerous ego territory right now. Well, you didn't say thank you. Well, did you do it because you wanted to be nice, or did you do it to get a thank you? It's, you know. But then they started. He flipped his hat, and they started arguing, and then the taller guy pulled a knife out, and then the guy does his out comes a gun, and it became a game of rock paper scissors and baseball batting. Um, a very appropriate. The guy goes for a knife, fine, I'll go for my gun. I don't have a problem with what happened in that moment, but if we wind it back, why? If the guy didn't say thank you, okay, he's an asshole. Let him go. You know, just don't help him again. There's no need to then get that sense of I want to be right about this. You need to know that I helped you and you didn't say thank you. And I've been guilty of that myself. Like you open a door for someone and they walk through and they don't say anything. I always go, don't mention it. Which is, I don't need to say that. It just makes me feel better inside sometimes.
Mhm.
And we all find ourselves in those traps. But that knife to gun scenario, appropriate use of a gun because the guy went for a knife, inappropriate use of a knife, but it didn't even need to get to that point because again, it started here and then it ended up, as the standoff, which was, and again, the gun becomes, if things go on, I've got my gun here. One of the biggest fantasies in self-protection is that picture peen, I've got this clean draw coming in against this opponent from known distance, and real life don't work that way. It really doesn't. A lot of the time, what saves you is the person's as useless as you are, and you winning by luck as much as design.
Uh,
Um,
for for the listeners, if you haven't watched Jay's reality check videos, which again I insist that you do that, and do your homework and get educated on this stuff. The number of incompetent fighters that he puts forth that get into bad situations that end up going very, very wrong for sometimes both parties is remarkable. I mean, competence is not assumed on the part of your threat at all, but the threat part, like you've highlighted a number of occasions where someone just gets into a fist fight and then one maybe is a little more skilled than the other, pops some guy, he hits his head on the cement parking lot, and now you've got a grievous injury for a scenario that again was disproportionate in result, maybe not in action, but disproportionate in result.
it becomes interesting when you deal with that though, because outcome isn't the measure of the action. Imminency is.
Right.
And when you look at legal, moral, and ethical ramifications of actions that we take, that's where fantasy dies. Especially online. If you, I'll be honest, I have a great audience. My audience is really, really good, and it's overwhelmingly positive. I've got a good Pareto. I've got 80% awesome. The 20%, some are over, they're trolling a little bit. Some are just absolute, morons.
Not enough to make YouTube keep you, on the air all the time, though, right?
Well, the problem with YouTube I have, it's a slight diversion because I switched to Instagram and Facebook. I started off on Facebook with uploads to YouTube when I was working with the Budo brothers and we put it on their channel. And then they content hit them. They just went absolutely not. You're not putting that up, and they gave them a strike. Now they get one more strike and their channel's taken down. Now the Budo brothers have got 2.1 million subscribers on their channel, big audience. You don't want to be losing that. So that's why Reality Check on YouTube ended up becoming its own thing. We were getting 13 million up to. We averaged about 2 to 3 million views on the videos. Then Facebook started shadow banning what we were doing. So we started getting these adult content hits, and YouTube, every single video I put up, mature content, must be able to watch this. Now, I don't mind that per se, if they were consistent, but half the time the videos I'm commenting on are still up on YouTube in their original format, no problem. I do a commentary on it, and I like to think I add a little bit of a social value to the video. I don't just do the violence porn, and all of a sudden I'm getting smacked with adult content strikes, and I don't get monetized in Canada anyway. So
Mm.
fine. YouTube, I'll put a video up there every now and then, but most of my stuff now is on Instagram and Facebook because it's just easier to get the content out. The content I want to put out there isn't to sell things. I have courses. Of course, I've got the two courses. I've got the original reality check course and the two close with comfort course, the two main ones that I do. I do private tuition, I do consulting, I do expert opinions, I do all that stuff. But I don't, the videos, I want, if you do nothing else but watch my videos, I'd like that to still be a worthwhile experience that will teach you something. I want the information to be out there so we can just, make the world a little bit better one piece at a time. So when we look at what most people, the fantasies, like people talk online as if every confrontation is like morally simple and legally obvious. And that comes from both ends. Either, well, you shouldn't have F around and found out at crowd, or the other people, which is any action taken is instantly an assault and shouldn't have been done. But it's never obvious and it's never straightforward. The law doesn't work that way. You can be justified in the moment and you'll always face scrutiny afterwards. And then plenty of people, as in the supermarket example, escalate situations that they got no business escalating. A shove, a fall, a curve, a bad angle, a shot from a gun that shouldn't have gone off, and you're dealing with catastrophic injury or death. Force isn't judged by how scared you felt alone, but the facts that were present that led to you feeling that fear. And you can take an action which is absolutely not the right action to do, but as long as your reasons for doing that are good, or at least articulable and explainable, you can be okay. It's why maths teachers used to say, always show me you're working out. So even if your answer's wrong, you're working out is fine. They can see what led you to that, even if it's just one digit wrong that led you to the wrong answer. You get credit for your working out. Well, the law effectively, at the risk of oversimplifying, works on the same principle. You get credit for your working out. If the answer's right as well, good on you. But if your answer's wrong, your working out will still get you the pass mark if it's done properly.
Are there situations where I kind of a two-part question here, where people who are maybe just waking up to the idea of, gee, I need to, develop some organic, and by organic, I mean, skills of the stuff that's actually literally attached to you that has blood flowing in it, organic skills in areas where they haven't trained before. Maybe they have some use of a Kubotan. Maybe they have listened to one of our previous shows where we talked about pepper spray and they've adopted that as an escalation of force, one of the steps up that ladder. They already probably have a CCW, so they've got that part covered, but they haven't really thought about the hands and the feet part. Are there ways that are more efficient for middle age or maybe slightly above middle age folks like the three of us to learn that stuff? And then the second part of the same question is, are there things that you would call, in the Navy, we call it negative training. Negative training is training to the wrong thing. In other words, you're imbuing someone with misinformation that you shouldn't do
Mm.
that. Like, I'm going to point out do I want to mention it? I think I will. There's a
You can always
Facebook.
edit it out if you don't.
Yeah, that's true. I can, but I think I want this in there. There is a very entertaining page on Facebook called Point Fighter. And in there, you've seen this, you're laughing.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about. I question whether the proprietor of this page is, I hate to say it this way, is helping the the mentally handicapped to get some exercise and try to learn some skills, or whether his practitioners, his students, are actually serious. And
I have two theories.
if they're serious, then he's giving them false confidence.
Yeah. It's not his pay. He doesn't train those people. He collects the footage. So he'll collect point fighting live from all around the world. Now, point fighting in the martial arts world isn't widely thought of. I've done it and I've taught it, and it's fun. It's a really good way to get kids exposure to adrenaline early on, because it's a competitive framework. And there's some old school fighters back in the day. There's a gentleman in England called Alfie Lewis who's a tremendous influence and inspiration on me. Not someone I actually trained under, but the way he moves, the way he is. And that guy was hardcore. He was a point fighter, but he would wreck you. He would absolutely destroy you. It's now almost a game of tag with gear on, but it becomes a form of an introduction to the wider martial arts community. It's a safe way to introduce an element of chaos into your training. If you're swimming or learning to swim, at some point you have to jump in the water. If you're training for a protective environment or a self-defense environment, at some point you have to put a chaos drill or a non-compliance piece in there. One of the reasons that you hear a lot of this in martial arts, and it's kind of related to the idea of the gun stuff. I don't train for sport, I train for the street. Well, the people that make the biggest distinction between street and sport are normally the worst at both. If I train for a sport, especially if it's a full contact one like boxing or wrestling or jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or something like that, I'm training to deliver my skills to someone that doesn't want me to and is equally skilled. So I've got a constant pressure test and quality control metric of what I do. If I train for self-defense, I can turn up in the class with my camo cargo pants and my tight short sleeve rash guard top and throw the hammer fists and things in there. In the absence of a class that does any form of pressure testing or non-compliant drilling, I have no way of knowing that works until I have to use it, and that isn't the time I want to be finding out if that works or not. When it comes to for ourselves, as we're getting on in a little more advanced than I is. So the point fighter, I'll finish that. Sorry, my ADHD brain was kicking in there. We've got triple F brain and I've got ADHD.
Well, I'm talking, by the way, I want to be clear. I'm talking about Point Fighter Live. That's the name, and they have 2.4 million
I know the
followers.
channel. I know the channel well. I'm not convinced it isn't a spoof channel. I'm genuinely not convinced that he doesn't just seek out the stuff that he knows he's going to get clickbait. Because if you're in, I think he's either Australian or American, the guy that runs it, I think. I can't remember.
Unfortunately for us, he's an American, and he does these things in Miami where he has people with no coordination and no skills do things like break, pre-stressed boards, and
And they've got like the face makeup on now, and they've got all the outfits
sometimes
and things.
and they throws a pillow at them, and they have to avoid being hit by the pillow.
I'm convinced it's a spoof. I cannot believe in this day and age. I mean, 1993 was the paradigm shift in martial arts with the advent of UFC 1. Certainly
Yeah.
the modern martial arts scene.
Yeah.
I can't believe in this day and age people are presenting that as serious. If they're presenting it as fun, great, do it. I've got no problem with that because again, people talk about validity or authenticity of martial arts. Any martial art is valid if it delivers what it's telling you it will deliver. Now, not every martial art is for self-defense. Some are for fitness, some are for fun, some are for friends, some are for companionship, some are literally just to get you out of the house and have a bit of a giggle. But they all then try and say, and we'll teach you how to defend yourself. That's crap. Most martial arts are not good at it. Self-protection, because I don't like the self-defense is a legal term. It's a defense against excessive use of force. I was acting in self-defense. Self-protection is a term I prefer to use because it's more dynamic. I can take action to protect myself without necessarily defending myself.
Okay.
So, and it sounds semantic, but it's just a little subtle mindset shift in the way we approach things. I actually, the late great Peter Considine was actually the guy that taught me that term. He actually passed away a couple of days ago, actually, rest his soul. But he was who I got that from, the idea of self-protection, because it's a much more all-encompassing mindset. Now, if I'm not pretending that I'm teaching you self-defense, then it doesn't matter. Like if you look at Kyudo, which is Japanese archery, it's a martial art, no use in self-defense whatsoever. There are some attributes you can pull from it, sure, but you can pull attributes from, football, soccer, hockey, whatever you want to do. But if a martial art is saying we will teach you to defend yourself, you have to qualify that. Throwing a punch and a kick isn't the same as defending yourself. So when you look at self-protection and martial arts, there's overlap, but they're not synonymous. Most instructors will put on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and then do a technique and say, oh, this is the self-defense stuff we do. No, that's martial arts in a pair of jeans. It's not the same thing. It really isn't. And this is, again, where the problems creep in. For the non-athletic people amongst us, that gets even bigger because, again, most people pitch martial arts and self-defense training as if you've got an elite athlete that you're training with. And for ordinary people, especially the older ones that don't have an athletic background, you have to have a prioritization matrix. So awareness and avoidance is your first thing. be aware of what's going on, avoid going to places where you shouldn't be. Verbal boundary setting, so learning again that communication piece and how you get that across. Movement and positional habits. What's your routine? Is it predictable? Can you take safer routes to get places? Simple, gross motor, empty-handed skills. I have a paradigm from when I was training under Paul Vunak in PFS. They had something called escape to gain safety. So it's what you want to do. Escape is eyes, gain is groin, two is throat, and safety is shin. So it's a paradigm. You don't necessarily need to have 20,000 techniques. You remember those are the targets that you hit, and you can usually cobble something together in some way, shape, or form. Now, I developed it way beyond the way PFS still do that. It's a simplified thing that you can remember easy under pressure. I've made it a little bit more cohesive, and I've tweaked that a few times to the point where it's not even recognizable. But again, you need to have something that you can do. Then you need to do scenario-based decision making, and then integrate the tools, like the firearms, like the blades.
Because people tend to be gear oriented because that's fun. And I got new gear, therefore, I can show it off or I can use it and become more effective or whatever. What type of martial arts implements would you say? You mentioned Eskrima, but people are generally going to walk around with a 24-inch stick. Do you think that people should consider to maybe augment their meager, or that was a mean thing to say, because I'm not good either at this, but
they're less substantial skill set.
They're underdeveloped skill set. Let's put it as underdeveloped skill set that would be either, hey, this is a really good idea. Kubotan may be an example of that. Or maybe there's ideas out there that you know what, this is just Hollywood and this is a really bad idea, like walking around with a shuriken or something like that, where, it really is like, really don't do that. Are there things that fit either of those recommended categories or please don't do this categories?
My simple guide is I'm very wary of anything which people buy as a shortcut to judgment. Any tool has got the inherent risk of encouraging overconfidence. So
wow, that was really good.
It's hard to deploy under stress. There's legal ambiguity. It can become a liability depending on the jurisdictions that you're in. And likewise, any training that a lot of these tools will use is built on cooperation, fantasy timing, or an assumption that you'll see trouble coming. So most products tend to work better in the marketing video than they do in sudden, ugly, and close range problems. So I'm a little skeptical sometimes. The other thing is as well, if you take a Kubotan and there we go. I've actually got one on my desk. So take a Kubotan here. You don't want to know what else I got on my desk, I tell you. The problem is I can give this to anyone and they can sort of do that. So this on its own does nothing. I still have to put the time in training with that for that to be effective. I have to practice being able to get it out. They used to do that. I never liked this one. You used to say put your keys between your knuckles.
Yeah, I've heard
Good
that.
way to break your knuckles.
I was going to say that looks like a trip to the hospital.
It is, but it's still taught. Put your car keys in there. No. So with any option, the option itself does nothing. And hey, another good example. I've got a little skin to him. Okay. Is this inherently dangerous?
Tell the audio show. Tell people what you're holding.
A skin do. Sorry, it's a knife. It's like basically the sort of like ankle knife. The
A 3.5-inch blade.
Yeah, it's a fixed blade, very thin. It is sharp. Designed to sit in the ankle and come out like so. On its own, I'm going to put it on my desk. It's not doing much, is it? It's useless on its own. I have to do something with it. So when we look at something like a knife or a gun, they're a little easier to use to get an effect. But it's still my ability to use it that's going to count. Like you can buy a gun. If I can't put a shot on target, it's useless. If I can't draw it under pressure, it's useless. If I can't, clear a stoppage or whatever it is, it's useless. And most of these force qualifiers or amplifiers that they call them, I'd much rather spend the time you spend trying to use that. You're better off just learning to throw a decent punch because it'll serve you just as well. A lot of them also, again, depending on the jurisdiction, you carry anything in Canada for self-defense, it's instantly illegal.
Because of the intent, because of the purpose.
Yes, correction.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct rather. So what
Yeah.
you do is you correct that and you say, well, I carry this for, um, I've got this wonderful ASP flashlight at Ileta. It's very nice.
Hmm.
But it's a flashlight, but I can give you good clatter with it. But the primary purpose is not to clatter you, it's a flashlight. So I can carry a flashlight. I can carry anything. I can carry a knife as long as I've got a purpose for the knife outside of defending myself with it. But even there, context is king. Carrying a knife that I say for box cutting or for operational or at work is one thing. If I'm at a nightclub at 3 o'clock in the morning and I've got a cookery strapped to my lower back, I'm going to run out of reasons as to why I'm carrying that because, again, the purpose is always context decided too.
Well, do simple
Pepper
implements
spray.
or things that are impromptu? I mean, you mentioned pepper spray. I mean, pepper spray is deliberate, legal in some places, not legal in others.
Yeah.
But is, the glass on the bar or things like that? I mean, I'm not saying you're going to train to break a bottle over someone's head, but are sometimes those the most convenient or useful?
Expedient.
They can be, but most people shred their own hands.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm using the
They
the
don't,
bottle as the first thing
you
that
know.
came to my
And
mind.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
What we call those weapons of opportunity.
Yes.
Um, you're better off picking up a bar stool and just holding that in front of you like that.
Yeah.
Use it to create distance. See, that's the other thing as well. You want to buy yourself time as much as anything else, and that's giving you the pause to weigh the guy up. It's a really weird little idiosyncrasy. If you actually stick a bar stool out the legs towards someone, they'll always grab the bar stool. It's not going to do anything, but there's this psychological barrier. It's just making it difficult to get around. Um, Believe it or not, something like I'm holding up a pencil right now. If you got a sharpened pencil,
John
I can
Wick.
think of a million and one reasons why you would carry a pencil. I can also think of some very soft, squishy areas that you can stick the damn thing into, and I don't have to justify any reason to carry a pencil.
When I've had relatives traveling, I have said, carry a mechanical pencil with you, a mechanical pencil, a Pentel P205 or 207, mechanical pencil. You can use it for 1,000 things. Writing yourself notes, have it clipped to your shirt or your shirt pocket, because it can be a wildly, useful tool if you're getting attacked. So,
100%. But again, you have to train with that.
yeah.
And the training that people should consider is the stuff that is for their body type, age, mobility issues, things like that, are most effective or practical, and at the same time should give them those other lower rungs on the ladder of the escalation of force, in addition to the pepper spray or the firearm. But how does someone choose? I mean, some of us are not going to ever learn jujitsu. They're not going to
Mm.
learn anything other. If they learn a martial art, it's probably going to be striking based and not control based.
At my age, it's maybe Tai Chi. That's just slow.
Do not underestimate Tai Chi. My instructor is Sifu Harinder Singh is actually a Tai Chi. He's a Chen Tai Chi master as well. His other arts, since he's been doing Tai Chi, are up here. It's lifted his game way beyond what he was doing with purely the physical stuff. Tai Chi used to be a badass art, and it still is if you find the right teachers. But it takes a long, long time to get it to that level. It's not an instant fix. Rather than think of arts, think of gaps in your game. You don't need to go and do jujitsu 6 times a week with the young pups. That's probably not a good idea. But I suggest you do at least some time, even if it's a few privates, with a good jujitsu coach, just to give you an understanding of what it's like to be on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will always lose where you don't know. A shark in the desert is knackered, can't do much, and a lion in the ocean will drown. You need to at least have an awareness or to be able to speak a little bit the language of where you're going. If the only thing you go with that jiu-jitsu guy for is to say, I need to find the quickest way to get back to my feet, who gets up quicker off the floor than a jiu-jitsu guy. Not many. Maybe a wrestler and a scramble, but then you're looking at massive athletic endeavors, and I speak that as a catch wrestler. Um, so spend time there, even if you don't want to. If nothing else, find the cause of your own ignorance. Then look at what can I do to strike. One of my private clients is he's Canadian, but he's got CCW permits and things. So I spend a lot of time doing blade and firearm integration with him. He can't punch because he's got arthritic wrists. So I teach him strikes, some open-handed stuff, and just some distracting eye shots and things like that as well. You don't need to win a fight. It's not an MMA match. It's not a boxing match. You just need to not lose it. You look to survive. You look to enjoy. You look to go home. So when you look at, and the strange thing is as well, when you look at self-defense, most people always assume it's the strangest situations that we're talking about here. And they're certainly the extreme end of the scale. Most of the time, they want a victim, not an opponent. So if you've got even a stab of ability in you that you can just make life difficult for them, sometimes you just need to have enough to get your distance in there. But most violence and most defensive situations and most places that you find yourself will be someone that you know.
Wow. Never thought about that.
It is, but we prepare for the ninjas behind the bus stops. We don't prepare for the, the family member or the friend or the office worker or the people that we're not thinking about. And that's where most confrontations are.
And that brings a whole new dynamic because maybe now what you're willing to go to is a completely different set of circumstances. That brings up, there was one of the question here that had dovetailed into that perfectly. You had a recent video where there was a perspective that you had on the is it worth it? And I think that last part really dovetails into that nicely because you have to maybe think about, the consequences. I mean, there was another video I was watching where someone used a weapon of maybe it was at hand, although I don't really understand why the guy's walking around with a road flare and used a road flare to light his opponent on fire.
That was in Calgary.
Oh, that was a bit messed up. And I suppose that was a weapon of opportunity, but the whole is it worth it thing, when you bring in the perspective of you're going to get in confrontations with people you know.
They all knew each other. They'd been friends and known each other a long time, most of the people involved in that. And it was over a perceived slight or a short change or whatever. The fight started. They were attacking the guy. They went en masse to do it. And so he's like, okay. Shot his flare gun, which you can buy in, a local sporting goods store, Canadian Tire or Walmart. You can get them in the sporting sections. It's not going to be good for you, but it's not immediately lethal, so it'd probably fall under the less lethal category. But it's accessible, and it did what it needed to do. It got the people off him. Now, did he have a reason for carrying a flare gun? No. So he's instantly going to have problems with that. But it was that is it worth it principle. I started calling it the Jurassic Park principle, which is Jeff Goldblum's line. You were so busy wondering if you could, you never stopped to think if you should. And if you can just keep that decision point in you, just because I can, do I actually need to? The video that I'm finding very divisive of mine is there's the man with the young kid that's just being bratty and hitting him, and in the end the man shoves him and the kid was skittling and hits the concrete and starts like wailing. Now, from a Schadenfreude perspective, it's a fantastic video to watch because you're like, yeah, he got it, got what it deserved. Did he though? Because it's a kid. At the end of the day, you could just get your jog on some, just shut the door and walk in. But we always have this sense of outrage and justice, which tends to kick in, and that's when we find that we find ourselves acting out of emotion, and coming from positions of wanting to be right rather than actually being right and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, it's a lot of time to think about being wrong, I suppose, on the other end of that. So, anything else you want to drop on us? Any funny, closer stories type of thing? Or also, I do want you to, once again, kind of go through what your presence is, even though you've already said it once, but, how do people find you? How do they find your material? How do you subscribe for those so inclined? I mean, we could have a 9-hour show and you wouldn't go through all your stories. I'm sure of that.
No, definitely not. I did write a book called The Hound's Tale, which is available on Amazon. Stories of the journey from victim to teacher, and that's got some some good anecdotes in there. Some are serious, some are actually funny. It's, things I've done right. A lot of the things I did very wrong, and the lessons I learned along the way from doing that. So the hard copies aren't available yet. It's only in ebook format, but the hard copies should hopefully be out within the next 2 to 3 months. Um, I'm available on Instagram at Reality Check J. Reality Check with Jay Cooper is my YouTube channel, and Reality Check Academy is my Facebook page. If anyone is interested in talking further, you can reach me at realitycheckacademy.com as well as the website. That's at the moment it's been reconstructed, but there is a contact form if anyone wants to get a hold of me on that as well. But if you just type Reality Check with Jay Cooper, most of my stuff just pops up there. And the Budo brothers, bless their hearts, they got their digital seminar platform and they sell my stuff through them. And they're good guys. They really, their production content is second to none. They're really good video producers. So it's nice to be working with them.
Okay, any other funny story for us before we close out today?
Oh my word.
I mean, I know you've got 1,000. Yeah, which one you going to give us?
That's the thing. Give me something to fish with. So throw some bait in the water, and I'll see what bites.
Okay, it's a Frugal Firearms podcast, so someone screwed up with a gun. Got any of that?
Um.
Or it's the frugal part. Let's lean on
Okay.
that. Someone spent a whole lot of money on something that was completely ineffective, and they ended up with their butts
Oh,
kicked.
I got a good one for that. Yeah.
Yep.
Boom. So
Okay.
it's not necessarily firearms related, but when I was working, I always like this story. This actually speaks to criminal mindsets, and it actually does tie in because it speaks to that overconfidence piece. And we look at the tool, and we look at the weapon, and we're like, I've got this, therefore I'm good. So in one of the neighborhoods I worked in Manchester, which is a urban place in England, it's got some good areas and some not so good areas. We had a spate of burglaries on patio doors, like the sliding glass doors. And what the little scamps were doing was they were putting a crowbar on the rails, levering the door up, and then just wheeling it off,
Mm-hmm.
and then just going in the houses. And it was a very, very common MO. So one of the guys, when we were doing neighborhood inquiries, he was like, "Yeah, I'll show you what I've got with mine." And he said, "So you got my rail down here. You look at that; it's insulated, so you can't get a crowbar, and it's tailed over. And I've got the hinges locked in there, triple stack locked on the inside of that. So I've got." And he spent about an extra £2,000 plus on these,
Wow.
like all singing, all dancing. So he's like really gone to town on these extra security patio doors. So he's like, you can't get them off, so I'm going to stop them getting in. Literally a week later, we got called to a burglar at his house. They'd hide a breeze block through the glass.
Oops.
So he spent all this money on all these like things to stop them doing what they were doing. And they were just, okay, I'll do it anyway. He just like breeze blocked it and just went in quick and scattered out quick. So his complacency came in by the gear, the stuff that he'd done. He thought he was good to go. And no, it's a lot more than that. And I use the phrase target hardening. You're never going to make yourself unattackable, unbeatable, unkillable, unhurtable, or whatever.
Right.
What you need to do is make yourself a harder target. So make someone else or something else an easier proposition. Self-protection and the awareness piece starts with us first and foremost. Sun Tzu, if you know yourself and know your enemy, you will never be defeated. If you know yourself but do not know your enemy, you'll have 50-50. If you neither know yourself nor your enemy, you'll never taste victory. And the only thing I have control over in any given situation ultimately is myself. So that's one of the joys of martial arts training and preparedness. Prepared, not paranoid, is the watchword with it, but it gives you a much better understanding of who you are. Jiu-jitsu, if you've never done it, will give you an understanding of your panic reactions and your responses on the floor. If you've never been in a ring with someone throwing punches at you, not necessarily to hurt you badly, but certainly enough to actually land them on your face, get in there and do it. It'll give you a good understanding of who you are. We need to find ways to expose ourselves to uncomfortable situations because adrenaline is adrenaline and stress is stress. It's how we respond to that stress that dictates the success or failures in a given situation. So the more we can expose ourselves to that, the better it is.
Excellent. That's a lot of wisdom right there in that
Hmm.
show. Yeah, that was great. So, want to thank you, Jay, for coming on.
It's been a pleasure. It was fun, actually. That was shot by as well.
Whenever I look at the clock about how far in we are, it's like, man, we've been talking for a while, but the content is so good, it does seem to fly by really quickly. And the growth in the audience is kind of demonstrating that I guess the people who aren't even participating, they're just listening, and
Yeah.
there's more and more of them all the time. So, but again, thanks very much, Jay.
No, it's been a privilege.
Well, today we had an opportunity to talk to Jay. Jay gave us a very interesting perspective on martial arts, and he has got a wonderful channel there on YouTube. Would encourage everyone to take a look at. And I think we had one of our best shows we've had so far. Craig, what do you think?
I mean, it brought a different perspective that we really haven't brought to the table yet, because I mean, this is okay, the Frugal Firearms podcast. And this wasn't a very firearms centric show, but it also brought to light maybe some of the weaknesses that, you and I share these weaknesses, Ken. I'm not just, dumping on the audience here and saying that, they're weak and we're not. All of us, I think, haven't really thought about the totality of the self-protection construct. And, the one that really worried me the most was if something happens so fast and I can't get that gun into play, I mean, the game could be over before I ever have a chance.
Oh yeah,
And that happens in the real world. I mean, you'd say, well, I got this really great holster and stuff like that,
doesn't
and
matter
it
if they
it
got
might
the
not
drop on
matter.
you. You're I know if they have the drop on you, the element of surprise is probably the single greatest thing that can happen. But again, if you do everything before that, where you don't go to dangerous areas, you watch and maintain a high readiness and looking around what's going on and so forth,
And that should be normal.
that should be normal,
Right.
and you should go through life uneventfully in this regard, and that's
Yeah.
what we're after. And if things get dicey, walk away if you can. Walk away
Or run away if you
or run
must.
away. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I understand that his point about you can't always protect yourself from every threat, but you're right that situational awareness keeps you out of most of those threats. And if I think a lot of people have gone to appendix carry because, there are ways to get to the gun a little quicker and maybe in
Sure.
ways that a 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock carry doesn't do for you. But
Hmm.
it's not as simple as that. That's too easy an answer.
And I'm kind of opposed to it. Also, appendix carry does not work particularly well for people who are a little bit rounder, who have a bit of a muffin top, as they
True,
say.
true that, true that. It works for some people and not for others.
Not for
So,
others.
hey, what do we have coming up? Okay, getting back to product related shows, we have some very interesting ammunition that we're going to be testing with clear ballistics gel. That I think it's going to be very eye opening. We're going to have the CEO of that company on. We have two different types of targets that are, one of them is one that is supposed to basically last you forever because it self repairs. We have another show coming up, at least probably actually several shows on suppressors. I saw an interesting statistic on suppressors the other day. Between 1968 and 2024, I think,
Hmm.
the number of Form 4s that were filled out, in other words, people buying a suppressor,
Yeah.
was like 3 million.
Hmm.
In the last 3 months, it's been about 1.5 million.
Absolutely. There's a $0 tax stamp on it. I would
Right.
encourage anybody in a state that allows you to own a suppressor, which to me is
42 of
safety
them.
equipment, 42, which is to me safety equipment.
Yeah.
Go out and your next purchase should not be a firearm. Your next purchase should be a suppressor.
Right. And so we're going to have a couple shows on that. They're going to be different. They're not just going to be the same show repeated. It's going to be different price points of different companies. And then one of them is going to be a person who sits on the American Suppressor Association board who's going to talk about that. There's going to be an upcoming show from, hopefully, I think I got this dialed in, from kniferights.org, which is out there fighting for the underappreciated truth that, people think about 2A and they think about only in the gun context. There's a knife context to that too, and that's been underappreciated. So we're going to talk about that as well. Oh, holsters. We were talking about that before the show.
Indeed.
a couple different holster manufacturers that we're going to be featuring.
Yep.
But how do you get these people to show up? You guys, in other words, all y'all out there in the listening community need to subscribe. You need to share it. Please share because that's how we're getting our growth. Put down a like here and there because that's super easy for you. Very little effort, but it really helps us grow the audience. But there's one other thing, which is, do your own research, guys. We talked to Jay here for quite a long discussion about, the training and stuff he recommends. Find out the best trainers, find out the best equipment, find out all that stuff. Do your homework and find what's right for you because our answer, might not fit your reality, right?
Indeed. Well, thank you everyone for dialing in and listening to us. And we'll be back again soon with another show.
Exactly. Good night, folks.
I should be in Laguna Beach in July to train my teacher.
Did you say to train your teacher?
No, train with my teacher.
Oh, I think it's train your teacher.
I do actually teach him some stuff.
How does that work?
No, I have done that as well. He does it, take ideas off me normally on how to creatively swear at people in high stress situations. You got one of those voices, Ken. You could do you could do soothing nighttime relaxing. It's like, hello, ladies and gentlemen out there. We'd like to have some.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in this evening.
There you go. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. You just go to sleep with that chocolatey voice just washing over my soul.
You do understand that for audience capture and retention, I don't want him putting the audience to sleep. Know that,
no,
right?
I
That's
get
not...
that. Yeah, is that why you keep editing him out?
Yeah.
There you go.